Control doesn't always look like force. Sometimes it looks like kindness. Sometimes it feels like advice. They don't push you. They don't threaten you. They guide you, slowly. Cut to shadows. A slow zoom. They influence what you fear, what you want, what you believe. And the most terrifying part? You thank them for it. Today, we expose the dark psychology behind invisible control, the silent techniques used by manipulators to shape your decisions, emotions, and identity, without you ever realizing it. Once you see it, you'll never be controlled the same way again. Welcome to the Prince's Doctrine. You were never chained. That is the first lie you must unlearn. If control required force, most systems of power would collapse overnight. If domination looked like violence, people would resist. If oppression announced itself clearly, it would fail. True control is quieter, smarter, patient. The most effective prison has no bars, because the prisoner doesn't know he's inside it. From the moment you wake up, your choices feel personal. Your beliefs feel earned. Your fears feel natural. But they aren't. They were installed. Not by one person, not by one event, but by a system that understands something deeply unsettling about human psychology. People obey best when they believe the idea was theirs. This is why modern control doesn't command. It suggests. It doesn't demand. It frames. It doesn't dominate. It educates. And you call it guidance. History has always understood this. In ancient China, rulers did not rely solely on armies. They relied on Confucian conditioning, teaching obedience as virtue, hierarchy as harmony, submission as moral maturity. Rebellion wasn't crushed with swords first. It was neutralized in the mind. In medieval Europe, the church did not need soldiers in every village. It controlled fear of hell, of sin, of divine punishment. People governed themselves, violently, all in the name of righteousness. No chains, no guards, just belief. And belief is stronger than steel. The most dangerous illusion ever sold to mankind is this: you are free. Freedom, as presented to you, is not absence of control. It is permission to choose between approved options. You can think what you want, as long as it fits inside acceptable boundaries. You can speak your truth, as long as it doesn't threaten the structure. You can pursue success, as long as you don't challenge who defines it. This is psychological architecture. You live inside rules you didn't write. You fear consequences you've never tested. You obey expectations no one explicitly stated. And that is the genius of it. Because when no one appears to be controlling you, you stop looking for the controller. The cage disappears. The human mind craves safety, belonging, and certainty. And those cravings are exploited relentlessly. Fear is the primary lever. Not fear of physical harm, but fear of loss. Loss of approval, loss of identity, loss of status, loss of belonging. This is why shame works better than punishment, why silence hurts more than insult, why exclusion feels like death. Social conditioning trains you early. Be good, be agreeable, don't cause problems, don't stand out, don't question too much. Notice how control enters, disguised as virtue. The obedient child is praised. The questioning child is corrected. The compliant student is rewarded. The disruptive thinker is isolated. Over time, you learn a dangerous lesson. Survival comes from fitting in, not standing firm. So you internalize the rules, and once rules live inside you, the controller no longer needs to be present. This is called self-regulation, the final stage of domination. The most obedient people are not watched. They watch themselves. They feel guilt before acting, fear before speaking, doubt before deciding, and they believe it's their personality. It's not. It's programming. Manipulators understand this deeply. They don't rush. They don't reveal intent. They don't attack your strength. They target your morality, your desire to be fair, your need to be kind, your fear of being the bad one. Throughout history, power has always leaned on moral narratives. Empires justified conquest as civilizing missions. Kings framed obedience as loyalty to God. Modern systems sell exploitation as opportunity. The tactic remains unchanged. Define goodness, then punish anyone who violates it. Good people are the easiest to control because they hesitate, they overthink, they self-correct, they doubt their right to assert power. And while they hesitate, others move. This is why ruthless individuals rise faster. Not because they are stronger, but because they are unburdened. They do not seek permission from morality that was designed to restrain them. They understand a brutal truth. Rules are enforced differently depending on who benefits. Fear maintains silence. Hope maintains compliance. You are told that if you wait, obey, improve yourself quietly, reward will come. Later. Someday. Eventually. This future-oriented hope keeps you patient and passive, and when nothing changes, you blame yourself, not the system. That is invisible control at its finest. You are not oppressed. You are managed. You are not silenced. You are redirected. You are not dominated. You are guided. And guidance feels safe. That's why you thank those who limit you. Why you defend structures that drain you. Why you resist ideas that threaten your conditioning. Because breaking free doesn't feel empowering at first. It feels terrifying. Freedom demands responsibility. Clarity demands courage. Awareness demands conflict. And most people would rather remain comfortable than sovereign. But here is the turning point. The moment the cage cracks. The moment you realize your fear is not random. Your guilt is not natural. Your hesitation is not weakness. It was installed, and anything installed can be removed. The moment you see the mechanism, it loses power. That is why this knowledge is dangerous. Because once you recognize invisible control, you stop reacting emotionally. You stop seeking approval. You stop accepting moral traps disguised as virtue. You begin to observe instead of obey. And observation is the first act of rebellion. This chapter was not meant to comfort you. It was meant to wake you. Because now that the illusion is broken, a darker truth awaits. There are those who consciously use these mechanisms, who study human weakness, who engineer dependence, confusion, and loyalty. They are not accidents of the system. They are its architects. Once the illusion of freedom breaks, the mind searches for answers. Not what is controlling me, but who. Because systems do not operate themselves. Ideas do not spread without intent. And influence does not concentrate by accident. Behind every invisible cage, there is an architect. Not always a villain, not always a tyrant. Often, someone calm, intelligent, and disturbingly patient. They do not raise their voice. They do not reveal ambition. They rarely appear powerful at first. Because real control does not announce itself. It positions itself. The architects of control understand a truth most people avoid. Human beings are predictable under pressure. Fear narrows thinking. Hope delays resistance. Confusion paralyzes action. And the one who manages these three emotions, fear, hope, and confusion, does not need force. They need timing. Throughout history, power has belonged not to the strongest, but to the most psychologically fluent. Consider Niccolò Machiavelli, not as a man, but as a mirror. He did not invent cruelty. He observed reality without moral decoration. He saw that rulers who relied on love were abandoned when love faded. But rulers who controlled perception survived storms of hatred, because fear is consistent. Love is conditional. Power, he understood, is not maintained by intention, but by structure. And structure is psychological before it is physical. The modern controller is not obsessed with dominance. They are obsessed with leverage. They ask silently, what does this person fear losing? What approval do they crave? What belief limits them? Once identified, control becomes effortless. They don't attack confidence directly. They destabilize it slowly. They don't say, you're wrong. They say, are you sure? They don't deny reality. They reframe it. This is perception control, the most sophisticated weapon in human interaction. If I control how you interpret events, I control your emotional response. If I control your emotional response, I control your behavior. This is why gaslighting works, not because it convinces you immediately, but because it introduces doubt. Doubt fractures certainty, and certainty is the foundation of resistance. History is filled with examples of this subtle domination. In the Soviet Union, information was never entirely erased. It was distorted. Truth existed, but wrapped in ambiguity, contradiction, and exhaustion. People didn't rebel because they didn't know what to rebel against. When reality becomes unstable, people retreat inward. They stop acting. They start adapting. This is not chaos. This is control through confusion. Another favored tool of the architect is withholding, silence, delay, absence, not as weakness, but as strategy. When responses become unpredictable, the mind fills gaps with anxiety. When approval is inconsistent, dependence forms. When answers are delayed, power shifts to the one who decides when clarity arrives. This is why silence after conflict feels heavier than confrontation, because uncertainty forces emotional investment. The controller lets others chase closure, validation, and reassurance, while they remain still. Stillness is dominance. Reward and punishment follow next, but subtly. Not obvious rewards, not visible punishments, microsignals, approval through tone, disapproval through withdrawal, attention as currency. Behavior begins to shift automatically. People don't ask why they are changing. They only know what feels safer. Over time, identity bends. This is behavioral conditioning without awareness. The most dangerous part? The subject believes they are choosing. But controllers don't rely only on manipulation. They rely on signals. Weakness signals itself constantly, in posture, in speech, in emotional leakage, over-explaining, seeking reassurance, reacting too fast, apologizing when not required. These behaviors announce one thing: this person can be pressured. Architects of control don't create weakness. They select it. They move toward those already unsure, already seeking approval, already fearing loss. And when resistance appears, it is rarely crushed openly, because open punishment creates martyrs. Instead, resistance is isolated, ignored, ridiculed, framed as dangerous, unstable, or selfish. History shows this pattern again and again. Those who challenge systems are rarely debated. They are discredited. Once labeled, their ideas no longer matter. This is why resistance feels lonely, not because it is wrong, but because isolation is the price of clarity. Most people retreat at this stage, not due to lack of intelligence, but due to fear of social death. The architects know this. That's why control persists. But here is the truth. They never want you to reach. These mechanisms only work on the unaware. Once seen, they weaken. Once understood, they lose precision, which brings us to the final shift. Awareness alone creates paranoia, but mastery creates calm. The next chapter is not about spotting controllers everywhere. That is still reactive. The final chapter is about becoming internally uncontrollable. No emotional hooks, no approval dependence, no predictable reactions. When nothing inside you can be leveraged, external control collapses. And that is where power truly begins. Control collapses the moment it has nothing to grab. Not when you fight it, not when you expose it, but when you become unreachable to it. This is where most people fail. They learn about manipulation and become paranoid. They learn about power and become aggressive. They learn about dominance and become performative. All of these are still reactions. True power is non-reactive. It begins with detachment. Detachment is not weakness. It is not apathy. It is not emotional numbness. Detachment is the refusal to let external forces decide your internal state. Manipulation feeds on emotional immediacy, anger, fear, the need to respond. The moment you pause, the moment you don't explain, the moment you don't seek closure, control loses traction. This is why silence feels threatening to manipulators, because silence gives them nothing to adjust, mirror, or exploit. Emotional discipline is the first layer of sovereignty. You stop reacting to tone. You stop absorbing moods. You stop explaining yourself to those who already decided how they see you. You become internally still, and stillness is unsettling. The next shift is more difficult because it attacks identity. Most people are addicted to approval, even when they deny it. Approval feels like safety, like validation, like belonging. But approval seeking is a leash. Once you require permission to feel confident, you have already surrendered authority. The ruthless mindset is not cruel. It is self-anchored. Your worth is not voted on. Your direction is not negotiated. Your presence does not beg to be accepted. This is why dominant individuals appear calm under pressure. They are not scanning the room for reassurance. They are not adjusting themselves to fit expectations. They move from internal authority outward. This is where morality becomes dangerous. Not morality itself, but unexamined morality. Throughout history, morality has been used as a control narrative, not to create virtue, but to create obedience. You are told what a good person does, how a decent person behaves, what a respectable individual tolerates, and slowly your boundaries shrink. Power does not reject morality. It understands its function. A sovereign mind does not ask, is this good or bad? It asks, who benefits if I obey this rule? This is not corruption. This is clarity. Once you stop moralizing power, you stop being manipulated by guilt. You act deliberately, not impulsively, not defensively. This leads to the next layer, boundaries, not spoken boundaries, not explained boundaries, but felt boundaries, the kind enforced without words. Dominance does not argue, it does not threaten, it does not justify, it simply withdraws access, time, attention, energy. These are currencies, and once you treat them as such, others do too. Controlled aggression follows, not violence, but intensity, calm certainty, slow speech, direct eye contact, minimal explanation, the ability to say less and mean more. People sense this immediately, because unpredictability enters the equation. Predictability invites control. When others can anticipate your reactions, they can plan around you. When your emotional responses are inconsistent, calm, and delayed, control becomes risky. This is why powerful individuals appear mysterious, not because they hide, but because they do not leak. They do not announce plans. They do not broadcast emotions. They do not signal insecurity. Their internal world is inaccessible, and what cannot be accessed cannot be controlled. The final transformation is subtle, but permanent. You stop seeing yourself as a pawn, reacting to forces. You begin seeing the environment as a field of dynamics. You observe instead of absorb. You choose instead of comply. You move when it serves you, not when pressured. This is not domination over others. This is dominance over self. And self-dominance changes everything. Manipulators sense it and retreat. Controllers lose leverage and disengage. Games collapse because there is no player to trap. You are no longer angry at the world. You are no longer afraid of it. You are simply unavailable to its control. This is the quiet power Machiavelli understood. Not the power of force, not the power of fear, but the power of unshakable internal authority. And once you have that, no one controls you without your permission. You are not awake yet, but you are no longer asleep. This is the Prince's doctrine.